So you go from full-blown atheist to Satanist.
To aesthetic Satanist.
To aesthetic Satanist.
Full-on Satanist.
Wow.
I read like a Richard Dawkins book and I was like, well, I know everything now and I'm the smartest guy in the world, you know? And I had the sigil of Satan. I would argue against Christians that Satan is the better guy. I'm having like a psychedelic experience.
Whoa.
I can't remember her. I can only remember how she made me feel. I come out as Catholic, 10,000 followers lost in 24 hours.
Really? How long was this period, and did you experience anything beyond the natural realm?
Oh, yeah. And I have this like horrific, overwhelming feeling that there's something on the other side of the door waiting for me to open it at night. And I'm like terrified that there's something outside the door.
Ruslan.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a fantastic guest with us today. Stand-up comedian, Renaissance man, okay, newly converted Catholic, just fresh off the Whatever podcast. It was like 7 hours of goodness and not goodness. Without any further ado, Shayne Smith.
Hey,
Thank you for being here, man.
Dude, I'm stoked to be here.
I'm pumped, man. You're fresh off the pod, the Whatever podcast.
Dude, I'm incredibly fresh off.
7 hours?
It was like 7.5 hours, yeah.
Sheesh.
Straight, just 7.5 hours talking to the wildest people you can imagine about the wildest stuff.
Did you own them?
I did not.
Did you dunk on them?
I didn't dunk on. Well, no, actually, I did a little dunky maybe, but I tried to. I was like, we're gonna be here in the spirit of kindness. That was my whole goal, was to like help people understand the points, but from the perspective of like redemption and forgiveness, as opposed to shame for shame's sake.
You're a whore.
Yeah, that kind
None
of stuff
that?
where they're
Okay,
just
good.
like, you're the worst person and you're useless. And then it's like, okay, well, if you're not giving them a place to go, then what? What are you doing? You're just saying they're bad. They're just going to keep doing the bad thing, because why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
And so
you guys went, the stream went 7 hours long?
Yeah.
And so for folks who don't know, the Whatever podcast is like a relationship panel, similar to like Fresh and Fit, and they'll have these like debate conversations. I've been on it with Adam22 and Lila, Rose, and then Adam's wife. And so it's an interesting format, to say the least.
Yeah.
The part that was hard for anyone that's going there is it's in Santa Barbara, so you can't really fly into Santa Barbara. So you flew into LAX, drove 2 hours.
And
then how long? The stream was 7.
7.
And then you drove another 2 hours back down to OC.
Well, yeah, I drove more than 2 even. So by the time I got home, it was like 4:30 a.m. It was rough.
And so what would you say the biggest takeaway was of that experience in terms of just how that went over?
How that went, I think the biggest takeaway for me was, I mean, personally, I was on the podcast and I really wanted to do well. I'm a new convert, and so I see this thing online where anyone who has any clout that converts immediately is like, and I'm a Christian influencer, and you should listen to what I have to say about Christianity. Luckily, I'm Catholic, so I don't have anything to say. The magisterium will say it, and they're smart, and they went to school, which I did not. But I wanted to represent well, but I also wanted to, my whole goal as a person has influencer or whatever, but is Christian, is to first be me, and then for people to be like, well, he seems interesting. Why? What is his life about? What's going well for him? Then they see Christianity. Now we're good. So that was the goal in the pod, and I went on and I thought I did it well, but I also, I don't know, it does feel icky, right?
Did you feel like you had enough time to chime in and speak, or did it feel like
I did, because I'm a loud and pretty confrontational person, so I have no problem just being like, stop me now, like whatever. So it went well in that terms. I think I spoke quite a bit.
Okay.
So,
and how many people were on?
Oh, dude, it was like 10 of us, or like 9 of us. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. Who was on your side? Who was on the more conservative TradCon side?
This a lovely LDS girl named Dominica.
Okay.
And she was sweet. She showed out. She came through. I think she lives like down south, so she also drove far and like spent all night there and then drove home. But she's like this, sweet Mormon girl, married. So she was there to kind of talk about the evils of pornography and trying to like promote marriage. She'd married early and was very in love with her husband. So that was her like agenda, and she did well. She was sweet, yeah.
Nice. So going back a little bit, I want to get into your story. You grew up around a lot of LDS folks, right?
I did.
You're originally from Utah.
Yeah.
And so pretty rough upbringing. I feel like our lives are similar in the sense that you went the hardcore scene and I went the hip hop scene.
Right.
You know, but like very similar, arrested at age 11, had done weed, smoking cigarettes, selling weed.
Yep.
I almost smoked crack once.
Really?
Yeah, thankfully I didn't.
Yeah. And see, and I did get into hard drugs a little bit, but I'm so lucky that I was so young and so like you're resilient, you know. And then I moved past that. But
so take me back to just your childhood. Your mother dealt with some substance abuse issues, as did mine.
Yeah.
My mom was an alcoholic, and you didn't meet your biological father until I think you said you were 5. You met him as a kid, but then you met him again at 5.
Yeah, I didn't really have any like memories or experiences with him until I was like a little older, and I think I only remember those because I have like a partially eidetic memory or whatever.
So you grow up Utah, and just sounds like fairly rough upbringing, to say the least.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I grew up in the middle of nowhere, like a small town. I think people don't realize like what it's like to be poor in a small town as opposed to like a city. I always meet like I moved to New York and I have so many friends. I moved to Bed-Stuy and I had like hood friends and they'd be like, I didn't know white people like you existed. And I'm like, yeah, dude, we're out there. We're really out. There's a ton of us too, but we're just like trapped in the mountains or whatever. We're all hill people. But yeah, man. So I grew up in the trailer park and just I knew all these like crazy people, bikers and stuff, and so I just didn't have like a stable childhood at all. My mother, she was unfortunately dating people who were just like the worst, and then married someone who was also the worst, and now we're trapped in this situation, and no money, no family life, no God, no stability at all. So I just like, me and my brothers just kind of like sorted it out for ourselves starting like incredibly young. I'm trying to think of the first, I was like fully smoking a pack a day when I was like 12 years old. So not great. I was like a little man.
You were one of how many?
So I grew up in the home with 3 brothers.
Okay.
So there were 4 of us.
And ages?
So I think 2 of them are Irish twins with me. So they were my stepbrothers, and they're both 1 year older and 1 year younger, respectively. So we went to school, best friends together.
Oh, cool.
And then my younger brother's like 5 years younger than me, I think.
Okay. So all boys.
All boys.
You're right in the middle.
Yep.
You guys are getting into just absolutely deviant behavior. Was it just because of the lack of supervision with your mom going through her own stuff?
I think so. There's also like a certain point where as a kid, even especially a young man, you sort of like meet these people and you go, oh, their respect is the respect I want. Not the parents, not the school, not community leaders, none of this. Like this group is what matters. And you kind of just like make that group your family in a way. And so me and my brothers did that where we immediately were like, oh, well, this group of people and what they think of us more than anything else. And that's like the road to male destruction, right? When you're young. And so that was kind of it. My mom just had her own thing going on, and she kind of like let us do what we wanted, and then we fell into a group of people who were less than good, and then you're just like, whatever you got to do to impress them, to gain their respect, and what do like rough dudes respect? Violence in like, wild behavior, and people who are promiscuous. And so that was just like our whole deal.
Was there any ideas of God as a child? Was anyone going to church? Was anyone slightly religious while you're in the middle of this or before this?
Yeah, so my mom, she grew up non-religious and then had like a conversion when I think before I was born. And she went to some church in a Protestant church, I think just like a non-denominational, and that's what she still is today. But and then she kind of fell out of that. And then there was one point when I was young where we went to church for like maybe a year at like a Baptist church where this family ran a church in their own home, and it was like a double wide trailer. So every Sunday they would get in the van, pick everyone up who didn't have a car. And don't forget, I'm living in the boonies of Utah. So like they're literally driving for 2.5 hours every Sunday, picking everyone up because people live so far apart.
Wow.
Like my best friends lived like 50 miles away from me, and we all went to school in the same place. Like that's how small this place is. Whoa. So they're picking all these people up in the like church van. Then they show up to the trailer and they push everything they own into the 2 back rooms, and the whole middle of the church, or the whole middle of the trailer, becomes the church. And they had like a pulpit they made and stuff. And then everyone sings and the adults do their thing. And I don't know what adults do at Protestant church. I've never been to a service really. So I don't know what they were doing, but then the kids would go into a back room and they would, teach us about Noah or whatever. So I have those memories, and I have a distinct memory of them doing communion and my mother refusing to allow us to take it because we weren't baptized or old enough to understand. And there was this huge argument. I remember being a child being like, I do not understand why these people are arguing in church. But my mom was pretty hardcore on that view.
Props to her. She's right.
Yeah,
though.
for sure. Right. Especially if she's in a Baptist church and you're a Protestant, that's a core Protestant belief, right? They want you to be an adult and make a very sober and conscious decision to become baptized. Yeah, which is like the Catholic version of your of being confirmed. Yeah.
So I remember we went to, a couple of years ago, this is actually long, 15 years ago, we went to a Rock the Bells festival, hip hop festival.
Yeah.
And we stayed the night in San Bernardino, and the next morning went to like Black Baptist church with all my friends.
Yeah.
And there was half of us were Christian, half of us weren't Christian. And as they were passing the communion around, I literally turned to my friend and was like, Don't you dare take this.
Yeah.
Like, you don't play with God like this.
Yeah.
And it was almost this weird, like, my other Christian friend felt a way of me telling my non-Christian friend to not take it, and it was this weird thing. And I'm like, no, like, don't do that. Like, don't play with God that way. So that's cool that your mom did that.
Yeah. No, props to her.
Yeah.
And she's since had a reversion back to Christianity and is doing great. But that was it. Like, we kind of ended there, and then that was like my religious education. There in Utah, if you're in a high school, you can take a seminary class, and it's open to anyone. And it's LDS seminary, and obviously they can't have religious buildings on school property. But since it's Utah, the church owns all the property, and so they own property near every high school. So there's a seminary building, a walking distance from every high school in Utah.
Okay.
And you can take a class, like an elective class, like I want to learn about religion, and then you go to that seminary. So I did a semester of seminary, LDS seminary.
So was it actual LDS doctrine?
It's
or was
LDS doctrine,
okay.
but I think that it starts Bible and moves into what they would call the New Gospel, I think. And so I didn't get New Gospel stuff. I got like the Old Testament stuff.
Interesting.
So I did get like a legit religious education from the LDS church.
Wow.
And it wasn't bad. They were cool. It's also interesting because they do so much good work in their own community. Like, the guy who runs that seminary doesn't make money. He's just there to teach high schoolers about the faith. And so props to them, So
there was some seeds planted as a child. There was some basic Bible knowledge and Bible history, albeit from an LDS standpoint, but they're just going over just Old Testament, New Testament stories.
Stuff, basic stuff. Yeah. So like, I had no real religious education to speak of as a child and stuff, but I did have a mother who was culturally Christian in a way that, like, hey, well, God's going to take care of it. Every once in a while, someone would mention God or whatever, and that was kind of like the undertone in the home. That, like, if something really bad happens, well, like, God will get it worked out. Put your faith in God. So I did hear that language, and it does get into your head. Like, as a kid, even when I was like resentful of God, like, you can't be resentful of God unless you think he's around. So I definitely had that like written on my heart early.
And at the time, your mom is. At what point do you get the different stepfathers in the equation? Because your biological dad steps out.
Biological dad left when I was incredibly young. To his credit, to go to school, to be a better person, to make money, to take care of his kids. So he's doing what he's got to do and getting divorced. And then my mom takes me, and I get a new stepdad immediately, like when I was so young. But that guy left when I was around, what do I want to say, 10? 10 or 11? And then new stepdad just showed up. Like, my mom left, And I was like, oh, word. All right, weird. I hope she's okay. And I went and just like lived with friends and was homeless for a while.
For real?
Yeah, yeah. And so I did that thing when you're a kid where you're like, hey, can I stay at your house? Like, my mom asked me if I could stay somewhere because she's like doing a thing with my dad. And then people are like, oh, well, I guess you could say it's a school night. But then I just like do that over and over, you know? And people never catch on to what you're up to. And so, but then my mom came back and she was like,
where did she go?
She went with some guy, I don't know, on a spirit journey. I don't know where she went.
Man.
She's going through it, you know. And to her credit, like she came out the other side, and I don't know what she went through or how awful it was, but she came back and she was like, hey, I'm with this guy now. And then that was like the worst stepdad of all of them. And so then I move in with them, and then it kind of just like cascades down into like a life of crime. And
So you were basically homeless for a window of time.
Yeah, yeah, off and on as a kid. And there would be times where I wouldn't want to come home to my stepfather because he was just like out of his mind. So like, I've told the story before, but like there would be times like in the winter where I would just go walk all night and not sleep because I was afraid if I fell asleep or I would be too cold that I would freeze to death.
And Utah's cold.
In Utah, it's cold. So I would just walk for miles and miles over and over again, just waiting for the sun to come up so that I could go to a friend's house and then just like pass out there.
Jeez.
Yeah, yeah. So not a great home life.
Where were your brothers at this point?
So we were all just kind of doing our own thing.
Okay.
Like it was every man for himself at certain points where it's like, well, you can't come to Jeff's with me because the two of us can't just show up. So you got to go X, Y, and Z, you know. And then my older brother, he had older friends, and so he was kind of like with them. I do have like weird regrets where I'm like, I should have like watched out for my brothers more. But it was such a like, hey, I got to get out of here. Where are you going? Sort of just like every man for himself thing.
Now, one of your stepdads was also charged with manslaughter?
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So my last stepfather I had, the worst one, he was a criminal and he was up to all sorts of stuff. And he beat someone to death.
Jeez.
And was charged with manslaughter. And I think he did it again.
He did it a second time?
Yeah, yeah. And was released a second time.
Wait. He beats someone to death.
Manslaughter. So like the least degree of murder you can have.
Gets off.
Does his time.
But does his time?
Does his time.
How much time did he do? You remember?
Ooh, I think I think that one was a little year and a half. Yeah, not even anything crazy. Well, here's the thing: when you live in
what's going on in Utah, bro?
Dude, it's any small town. Like if you're in Appalachia, if you're in New Mexico, Wyoming, you know, when you're in these small towns and there are like criminal organizations or even just people.
Yeah,
like that's not the sheriff. That's Bob. You know him. You know what I mean? Like he shows up and he's like gone to school with you, knows you intimately, sees you everywhere.
So they're like, you just got to go sit down for a year.
Yeah, man. And he's like, I can't believe you. Like, what are you doing? And he's like, that guy attacked me or whatever. You know, you say whatever and then it just moves on. Or the police in small towns are being affected by the fact that they have like no gang unit. And if there's like, you know, guys who are affiliated with, we'll just say prison gangs who are pretty serious. And they're like, well, if you throw the book at me, we're gonna throw the book back at you. And obviously, like, what are you gonna do? You live in a small town. Everyone knows where you live, who you are, you know. And if a motorcycle club can hire a guy from 2 states over who's a stranger to come kill you, then you got to play ball. So,
jeez. So he gets off the first time, or he does a year.
Yeah.
Gets
And then
out. Does it again?
Yeah, he got out, got a DUI, went to jail for like a little less than a year that time, got out and did it again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're just letting this guy
how close
in
are you
and out
with this stepdad?
I mean, I'm not close to him in a way where we had like a relationship, but like obviously I live with him. Yeah. There's a lot of proximity and he's like a very large, strong guy and I'm a child. So like he's in my life whether I want him to or not. And he tried to like do some dad things, teach us how to hunt, whatever, things like that, but it was rough. It was not good.
Whew, man, that sounds that doesn't sound like anything a child should have to go through.
No. And it was like he would do things like, oh, like you like I mess up at school So I come home and he would be like, well, if one of you messes up, everyone pays, like military style. And then he would have us like come out into the yard and fight him. And like, if
How
we
old are
didn't-
you?
11, 12, 13, 14, through all of it. Yeah. And so then he's like, every single one of you, like, fight me. But if you don't actually try, I'm gonna like beat you harder. So like, come at me. Let's go. Like, take your punishment. And so we would like fist fight a grown man.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a wild situation. Or if we would quarrel with each other, he would make us fight each other. And so like, so much violence.
I'm glad my dad wasn't around at this point, bro.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Well, mom had some weird like stepdad figures. They were all boyfriends that came and went, and one of them was young, one of them was older. The older one was very abusive towards her.
Yeah.
And so when she finally got out of that situation, it was just kind of like these, you know, kind of dudes that were around, and they would stay the night and stuff, but never had any sort of disciplinarian type of role. There was never that. So I'm like, man, gosh, I lucked out, bro.
Yeah, because you think like, oh, maybe if I had a disciplinarian, I would have been different. And it's like, no, you probably still would have made all the mistakes you made, but now you also have the trauma. So it's like not helping at all.
So how is he now? What happened to him?
He's incredibly dead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He's gone. He's gone.
Incredibly
You
Okay.
can't act like that and live that lifestyle for long before it catches up to you. So.
And were you in his life, or was he in your life when he passed?
No. As soon as I became an adult and I was big enough to be like, hey, like, you know, I'm gonna give you back what you give to me. Me and my brothers too. My brothers are I'm the smallest person in my family, so my brothers are like large individuals. So once we left, because we left the home, all of us left 16, 17, 15, you know. And so when we became adults and came back around to be in my mother's life, and he was kind of around, it was like, hey, everything's different now, and you answer to us. And so
he knew that, or you guys had to like reinforce that?
We made sure he knew, but he didn't. He definitely wasn't like messing around at that point.
Okay.
And so obviously that's like, I
he
guess
probably thought he was a great dad to you guys. From his
dude,
story.
1,000,000%.
I gave you discipline.
Yeah, there were weird times where, as he was getting into the twilight of his life and like trying to change things, and him and my mom had like moved away from that town and his friends and what he was up to, he still was like, dude, remember, do you remember that good memory? It's like, no, dog, I do not remember. There's no good memories. You're like a bad person, you know?
So at what point in your life do you realize that your childhood was abnormal? Because I think you grow up and you knew the whole time.
During. I remember being 8 years old and reading about someone contemplating ending their own life and being like, oh, I think about that. Oof. And then being so young, what was I reading? Like an Animorphs book. Do you remember that? Like, I'm 8. I'm so young, and being like, I think about that. Like I remember being like, oh, that's not normal. This is bad, and I have to hide this from people, or my mom's gonna get in trouble, or me and my brothers are all gonna get taken away, or you know. And that's like the insidious undercurrent, because a lot of people are like, how can a child endure so much abuse? How can a mom let it happen? But when there's like that much violence in a home, like everyone's surviving and doing everything they can to just stay together. And to stay together, obviously, you can't involve the police. You can't involve other people because you're going to endanger them too. He's incredibly dangerous. My mother can't tell her family and her friends or whoever because she's going to put herself or us in danger. It's that thing where like gang members in Compton like it started to get way out of pocket, and it's the like, where does your grandma live? You know, and it's like, well, what do you do? What do you do when someone says that? What they say is what you do.
Yeah. So I didn't understand how abnormal things were until I grew up.
Really?
And then I met like other people that like had like dads. And,
okay, yeah.
You know? And so they were, and then I was like, I didn't get it. You know, I didn't get it. I just thought this was normal for me.
I do have that thing where I thought my childhood was abnormal, and I knew it was early, but there's a lot of stuff that I was like, well, that's normal though. And I'll have a girlfriend or whatever, and I'll tell her something, and she's like, that was horrific. Don't talk about that. You know, like, be chill. Like, you got to warn me before you say something that bad. And I go, that's not normal. And she's like, absolutely not. Not even a little bit.
Yeah. Not to ask you like a super like social question. You mentioned gang members in Compton. I grew up in San Diego around gangs and
Yeah.
a lot of fatherlessness. What you're describing sounds very parallel, but also different.
Yeah.
What if you gave me like a summary of like how do communities become like this?
Oh,
right. Like
yeah.
like clearly there's a degree of poverty. Clearly there's a degree of you're living out in the middle of nowhere, perhaps lack of resources, right? But from your vantage point, growing up, like if you could pinpoint it, like how do these communities become this way where someone can have the type of life you have?
Yeah, it's a breakdown of values, and those values are going to get replaced. And so like I said that like gang members in Compton, and I don't know, I'm going off a Kendrick Lamar song here, but
I caught the reference.
Yeah,
Nice
yeah,
Kendrick
yeah.
reference.
And so, but he did like the "Where's Your Grandma Live," and that's a real thing that I had heard about even when I was young doing motorcycle club stuff. I'm very lucky that even though the community I was a part of was, for all intents and purposes, disgusting, there was a sense of omerta and sort of like honor among thieves and like things that were off limits. So like, and some of them are like so arbitrary. Like my stepfather clearly abuses my mother, and people know this, but they let it slide because they're married. But if my stepfather was to ever hit a different woman, it'd be over for him. You know, and so like kids and women are off limits unless they're your property, I guess, is sort of like the unsaid sort of vibe in that community. But it happens because there's a breakdown of values, and values break down when there's no family to enforce values. And so like, you know, I never knew, very, very, very rarely. And when you do meet them, they're so weird. Like, how many kids did you know where you're like, oh, you're poor also, and we're all messed up and we're kind of here. But then there's that one rich kid, and you're like, your parents love you. What are you doing here? You know, there was always, and he's the scariest one.
He is.
By far.
Because he has something to prove.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and so this community, especially, it's like everyone's so poor and struggling. And really what it comes down to, I think, is these communities happen because men want to feel fulfilled. They deeply want fulfillment, and they're not finding it. And there's so much fulfillment in violence and brotherhood. And violence increases brotherhood, and brotherhood increases violence. And if you don't have a value system to taper that off, or to like, everyone needs a war. That's really what it comes down to. And like, we're so lucky that the truth has been revealed to us, and we're fighting a spiritual war, wildly fulfilling, incredibly difficult. But like, if you're not fighting that war, you're going to fight a real one, or you're going to make one to fight.
You're going to make one to fight.
Yeah.
There's that innate aspect in men that they want a war.
Yeah.
And perhaps for a moment where they weren't warriors, maybe they were farmers, and they were getting access to get that aggression out, right? Outdoors, lifting things, doing hard things. And then when that becomes industrialized and you're working jobs where you're sedentary, or you're not working jobs at all, you just create new wars. And you create new battlefields.
Yeah. And those battlefields end up being like the battlefield of virtue, the battlefield of family, the battlefield of poverty. And then, you know, you go, okay, well, if we're all poor and we're fighting this war, and there's like a respect that comes with it, well, then there's like almost no incentive to get out of it. You know, you're in it together. It's almost like being a townie, like, and you're like proud of it, and you're proud of your working class status. And there's a part of you that's like, oh, I could go to school though. And then you're like, but what are my friends going to think? Now I'm one of them, you know, or whatever, like these sort of weird mindsets.
Yeah, that's interesting. I remember, so I grew up in San Diego, very different, the southeast side of San Diego, City Heights area, and in the 90s. And I remember people genuinely feeling like they couldn't do anything but participate in that sort of lifestyle.
Yeah.
Whether or not that was true or not, that was their feeling. My dad's not around. No one's around. There's no guidance. So we want nice things. So we're going to rob. We're going to steal. We're going to break into houses. We're going to sell weed. We're going to do what we can. And then the mothers would have to work multiple jobs.
Right.
So now you're unsupervised as a young man. When I moved here to North County, so we're in North County, San Diego, Vista, Oceanside, I remember meeting folks who had their fathers in their home that were, for all intents and purposes, seemingly Christian.
Yeah.
And they still had this bizarre fascination with gang culture.
Yeah.
Right? Like it was like, yeah, like we're going to put the blue shoelaces in our chucks, and we're going to learn to crip walk, and we're going to be these guys. And I saw good kids get sucked into kind of like what you said earlier, like the rich kid gets, and these kids like weren't rich, but they weren't poor, and they got sucked in. I remember there was dudes that like their dads were ministers in the house, and they caught murder charges. Like
it's
like
crazy.
craziness, and it's just that's that desire to belong aspect to 100%. A tribe, you know. And if you don't have a tight knit family, you will just go and seek stuff out, or perhaps there was probably some sort of trauma that also triggered that.
Right.
But it was very different than San Diego, and that people were just like, why are you trying to be a tough guy?
Yeah.
You know? But then they become the toughest guy,
dude,
and are willing to kill anybody.
It's so true. It's also funny because during this time of my life, I'm so anti-tough because to be tough is to invite the worst stuff. You know, like if you... And so that's why I had so many nerdy tattoos young, because I was like, oh, my friends are getting skulls and like hate and love on their knuckles, so I'll get Darth Vader, you know, because I'm up to this stuff, but I think it's funny that I'm like a nerd about it, which is so funny because then I grow up, and now that tattoos are popular, having a nerdy tattoo is the norm. But the whole thing with just like the respect, having people who care about you, who have your back. It's a thing I tell people a lot, and I go, the measure of your feeling of love from a brother as a man isn't if he would die for you. That's silly. As men, we are taught you got to die for people. Like firefighters run into buildings for strangers because they're paid. Like soldiers fight. All these people. Like as a man, if a woman is drowning and a bunch of men watch, what are the comments going to be? Get in there, drown too. What are you doing? And so. You have this, but that's not the measure of love. The measure of love is not if you would die for someone. It's who would you hurt for me? What would you do to your soul to help me? Who would you like? Do other people come before me? And that becomes an addictive process where everyone's trying to prove like it's not that I would die for you. Anyone would die for you. I would hurt for you. I will go out into the world and burn it down for you.
Yeah, you know, as you're saying this, so what happened for me is the end of my 7th grade year, we moved up here, and I was like, I got a fresh start. Right? And there were some things that I got into a couple fist fights, but there were some things that were going to potentially spin into violence, where people were looking for me and folks showing up with baseball bats because we were breaking into houses. When we got here in 8th grade, I was like, all right, this is a fresh start. I'm gonna be a professional basketball player.
Okay.
I'm going to the NBA. Until this day, there's never been an Armenian that's made it to the NBA.
Really?
Never. There's a guy in the G League right now that could.
Okay.
Yeah, my buddy Rufat, who's also a comedian, always says, if you count the Kardashians, we've taken more careers from the NBA than we've had. You know? And so shout out to Rufat. He's a good friend of mine. So I was like, bro, it's a fresh start. I'm good. And thankfully for me, it never got to that. There seems to be a threshold of violence that you crossed.
Yeah.
That once this threshold of violence got crossed, it turned into that paradigm of who would you hurt for me?
Yeah.
Which is that's a dark way to measure love.
100%. And at the time, it feels like so important. So like, I got you, dog. Like, no matter what happens, like I'll go to prison for you. I'll like sell. Basically, the idea is that like I'll sell my soul for you by like hurting myself and others. But like, you know, it's so rough. And it does. There's a threshold of violence where once you cross into that and you see and do certain things together, it just cascades down.
Because then you just become desensitized to it.
Exactly. I mean, and that's what happens in like anytime you read about like a mass like murder event or soldiers, you know, doing horrible things and whatever, it sort of begins small. And as one person crosses that main threshold, it just cascades into craziness. It's like a riot. Like the one person throws the trash can through the window and jumps into Best Buy, it's on.
Wow.
Now everyone is doing it. And that really is how it works.
Okay. So you mentioned earlier getting, would you say nerdy tattoos?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How old were you when you got your first tattoo?
14.
You were 14.
For like early 14. Like we're talking like 4 days in. Like
so like what, 9th grade or 8th grade?
8th grade.
8th grade.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
8th grade, you get your first tattoo. Do you remember? I'm sure you remember.
I do remember what it was. It's these words on my wrist. It says, "Live, love, burn, die."
As a 14-year-old.
Yeah. So it's like the dude version of Live, Laugh, Love.
Yeah.
Because the burn is supposed to be like burning with passion. And as a kid, as a 14-year-old, I get it. And I'm like, dude, I'm so hard right now. Like, I'm so tough. And it's such a dorky tattoo, but I got it with a friend, and that's why I've kept it. I have it like...
You guys got matching tattoos?
Yeah, we got matching tattoos in the same spot. I have a ton of matching tattoos, actually.
Bro, yeah. Do you know where the oldest tattoo shop is?
Jerusalem.
Yeah. Have you been?
No, but I want to go.
Yeah.
The back of my head is perfectly right for the Jerusalem cross.
Bro, the Jerusalem cross is fire. I got one right here.
Dude, it's
and then I
hard.
got this resurrection icon.
That's so sick.
Yeah, dude, that place is a trip because it's owned by, I want to say 30 generations of tattoo artists.
That's crazy.
And they're using stamps. They're like these little like stamp things. And then that's where they get the design from. But the stamps go back to like their great grandfather.
Yeah.
And so you're getting these like hundreds of years of tattoos. A Palestinian family. It's amazing. So you, as a tattoo guy, you should definitely. When things settle down, you should go for sure.
I want to go. And then there's also like, in tattooing culture, it was heavy in that area. Obviously, the Bible had to make rules about it.
Sure.
So they were going nuts on it.
Yeah.
But there's like some of the oldest tattoo traditions in the world are, I think, Coptic Christians, and they tattoo the cross on their forehead. And even the Pope was like, it's awesome. Yeah. I'm down with it. And
well, a lot of people don't know that Christians have made pilgrimages to Jerusalem to get tattoos.
Yeah.
For, I want to say, thousands of years.
Thousands. 100%. And Christians used to tattoo themselves to identify themselves, or tattoo messages secretly. So you shave your head, you have someone tattoo a message on your head, and then they tattoo the seal of the king or whoever gives the message. You grow your hair back out. You travel to a place. Now you're like a spy, and they shave your head and they see, oh, there's the message.
That's crazy.
A Greek king did that where he sent his messenger back, and they're like, what did the king said? And they shave his head, and it said revolt in Greek.
Whoa.
Sick, right?
Whoa.
It'd be a tough tattoo.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That is kind of a hard tattoo.
Right.
So at what point do you like really turn up with tattoos? Like 14 immediately. So you just
immediately.
Okay.
I joined the army when I was 17.
Okay.
And I had it was a problem. They were like, we got to figure out how to get you in here with sleeves. When I was 18 years old, I had full sleeves, my face, my neck.
How did you do that while you were in the army?
I left the army after a year. I was medically discharged.
Okay.
So,
thanks for serving our country for a year.
Absolutely not. As a kid, I was like, I'll avenge 9/11, and I just wanted to escape from my home.
Yeah.
So I joined the infantry, or whatever. It was stupid. So I lived in Benning for a year, and then I was medically discharged. This army doctor who, in retrospect, I don't know if he saved me or helped me, but he meant well. Basically, I came in after I had graduated from AIT and all this other stuff, and I was getting ready to go to some other things because I had like a ranger contract or whatever. And so I had done like RIP, and I was getting ready to go to ranger school, and I was going to fail. I'm a 17-year-old kid. AIT was so difficult for me, like airborne school. So I'm there, and my eye is messed up because I had been shooting, and I was seeing double. And I was like, this is a real problem. Anyway, it turned out that I have like a condition in my eye, but it's not a deal breaker. I could have stayed, but this doctor was like, you're not even 18 yet. Why don't you leave, do some growing up, and then come back? I'll write you a medical release, but you can still go to a doctor and get checked out, get glasses, or do whatever you need to do, and then come back. And he was very for real with me. You're miserable. You're a child. You shouldn't be here. And he basically helped smuggle me out of the army. And of course, I got home, and now I had a year of discipline, good food. I'm a man now. And, my stepfather's group and my brothers are doing motorcycle club stuff, and they're like, well, look at you. You know how to shoot a rifle. You got big. You got strong.
You're a perfect candidate.
Get on in here, big dog. And that's what happened. So I never went back.
Whoa.
Obviously.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the whole thank you for your story. Anytime like there's people who are like, you know, because I have like a military record or whatever, so people will be like, you should. The theaters does a thing like, oh, every veteran stand up, and someone will look at me. I'm like, don't look at me for
Not the
any
same
amount of
thing.
time. I'm not even close. I wasted money. I should have to pay back what I stole.
Wow. And so you do this year going through the training, and then you get out, and that's when you get into the face tats.
Yeah. Immediately. Like month one. You know? I remember because we're older or whatever. So when I joined, what it would be like 2004, 2003, 2004. Yeah, I joined in 2003. My birthday's in December. So 2004. So when I got out, I had like no money. You know, I had the money from being there and stuff. And I remember I took a bus from Georgia back to my small town in Utah. And I was on that bus for like 3 days. And I bought like a Nintendo DS or something. But yeah, I got home and immediately just spent all my money on like Xboxes and tattoos and stuff. Started chasing girls and just like lost the sauce. I got lost on the sauce immediately. You know?
Yeah. When's your birthday?
December 15th.
December 15th. Okay. Mine's is December 31st.
Nice.
What year were you supposed to graduate high school?
2005.
Okay, so I'm class of 03.
Okay,
My wife
yeah,
is
yeah.
class of 04, so you're a little younger than I am, 05. And so you transition out of the military.
Yeah.
And then at some point you got like a Satanist tattoo.
Yeah. I mean,
And at this point, are you believing in God, or are you not believing in anything?
no, I at this point I'm like, I read like a Richard Dawkins book, and I was like, well, I know everything now, and I'm the smartest guy in the world, you know. And so it's so stupid. So I was like on my like, this was because remember in these early 2000s, you and I when we're adults, this is the like 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
You talk about the new atheist.
The new atheists, yeah, they're killing it right now. And then of course, like I loved Hitchens, funny, charming, smart. Why wouldn't I trust this guy? And so I read Hitchens and stuff. So I was like a very like contrarian guy. Then I read a book called Dharma Punks and the Zen of punk rock or something. These 2 punk rock hardcore kid dudes that became Zen Buddhists. And one of them was much more interesting than the other. The other was doing like some weird stuff, but doesn't matter. And so I got into that, and then I started to get into like learning about religion. And then I did the contrarian thing where I'm angry at religion as an institution of man and what they're up to and politics and whatever. And so then I got into Satanism because that's like what girls are into.
Okay, hold on, back up.
You know, like goth girls.
So I had a Satanist acquaintance that I'll tell you about offline because people are going to freak out. A handful of our core Patreons know who this acquaintance is, but I'm not going to say it publicly because it's a little sketch. When you say Satanism, are you talking about atheist trolling religion Satanism? Or are you talking about actual power in the satanic
They're the same
aspect?
thing. They're the same
They're the same thing.
They're no different. People, so the Satanism that's like registered with the government, the like quote unquote religion that uses its like its church, for lack of a better term, in order to affect politics, like trying to take the 10 Commandments down because they're like, well, if you get the 10 Commandments, we get Baphomet type thing. Those people are trying to be secular, and it is like it's an aesthetic dressing in order to be political and troll, but also the types of people who come to them are interested in witchcraft and magic, are doing actual Satanism. And so it would be like if you started a fake Christian church and then people started showing up and they were like, well, it's Christian, let's do Christian stuff, even if it's aesthetic. And then before you know it, you're like, what would Christ want us to do on Monday? You know? And now you're actually doing it. Yeah, it's the thing where like me and my brother call each other bro exclusive. I don't say his name. It's very dorky. It's like we're in a Will Ferrell movie. And we did it as a joke. It started out, bro, what are you doing, bro? And then it becomes real.
It catches on.
And it catches on. And now that's how we actually talk. And I think that that's what's going on.
So when you got into it, you're saying that you're a 8 out of 10 atheist, influenced by the new atheists, and you're going into it initially you're in 10. are you going into it as a means to troll?
Yeah.
Or are you going into it as like, yeah, like I'm down with Satan. Like that's the homie.
So I'm going into it like I'm down to troll.
Okay.
And also like I'm an alternative guy and my culture is heavy metal, right? And the metal aesthetic, which now we know is memento mori and it's actually a Christian aesthetic. But at the time you think like it's an evil aesthetic, Satan or whatever. And so it's like a meme to get like 666 or all these things tattooed on you. And then you go, oh, the Church of Satan, that's so funny and edgy. And they're doing politics. And then like the hot girls are like, I'm going to sign up, whatever. And then you do it too. And then you're like, oh, but what about the aesthetic of magic? Like, how crazy is magic? And now you're reading occult stuff. And now you're like, what if I tried it? You know, or like, what if we did it? Or what if I got like sigil tattoo? And then it like cascades down into the next thing you know, you're like, I wonder if this works. And now you're reading about it and now you're interested in it. And then you're hearing like Satanist arguments or whatever. If God is so loving, why would he send his son to die instead of him? Which is obvious. They're the same guy. But like, you know, as a Satanist, Satanists are Gnostics, you know, they're Gnostic heretics too. And so, which is a funny distinction. People don't think about that, that Satanists are Gnostic heretics. But yeah.
So how deep did you get into like the I don't know how else to say it, like the quote unquote real stuff?
Deep enough that like I had the sigil of Satan. I would argue against Christians that Satan is the better guy. You know, there are arguments people make for why, like, oh, but he's giving choice. You don't have free choice. You know, they have all their arguments that if you read anything about any religion, you can dismantle pretty easily. But I got into it, and then now I'm getting into magic, and I'm getting into sigils and like all these other bad things, and I'm, you know, practicing. And then I have a woman in my life who was encouraging me to do these things, and so it was incredibly negative.
Wow.
You know,
the ego, right? To follow the ego. That's the North Star of Satanism.
100%. And that's the whole thing where magic is perception equals reality, which means you're the center of your reality. And as you alter your perception, you are altering reality. But what you don't think about when you think about what magic is saying and what that's saying is that means my reality is the reality and everyone else's reality is less than. And how I perceive is real, but what I perceive isn't real. That's not what reality does not correspond to my perception. And so it's an incredibly selfish, egotistical, horrible way to live, but it's dressed up in the dressings of like, well, but you do come first. Take care of yourself. Self-care, you know, no, you shouldn't have to suffer. You shouldn't have to pay. You should get yours. And it's like, you know, at its heart, it's like wildly selfish and destructive, but
that's the spirit of the air, though, right? That's literally what is being preached right now in the zeitgeist.
100%. When people are like, you know, people say like X, Y, or Z is Satanist in like public life or media, and people are like, oh, we're doing the satanic panic again. And I agree, the satanic panic was silly, but we're not panicking. We're making a literal observation about the value judgments you're making in media and stuff. Like they are satanistic for sure. They are.
Yeah. And in your dabbling, how long was this period, and did you experience anything beyond the natural realm?
Oh yeah. So I dabbled for a couple years before I kind of just stepped back and then stepped into deism and sort of like, okay, well, that's bad. But I did have strange experiences for sure. I, as a kid, I was a very scared kid. I thought I saw creatures and ghosts, and like I would spend so much time being afraid. And I obviously got over that. And then I became like a pretty rough adult, and I wasn't afraid of much. Once I started practicing and doing these negative things, like I would have so many moments where I'm bringing myself back to being a kid, where I wake up to go to the bathroom and I have this like horrific, overwhelming feeling that there's something on the other side of the door waiting for me to open it at night. And I would just sit in my bathroom as an adult man with my partner, wait in bed like at 1 a.m. and I'm like terrified that there's something outside the door. And those things continued until I stopped that practice. Yeah. And it didn't occur to me until much later how I was experiencing and feeling these things. You know? Yeah, it was crazy.
So you go from full-blown 8 out of 10 atheist
Yeah.
to Satanist.
To aesthetic Satanist.
To aesthetic Satanist.
Full-on Satanist.
Wow.
Yeah. And then back to aesthetic.
And then back to aesthetic because
Yeah,
you're like,
yeah.
okay, this stuff's real. I'm not playing with it
Exactly.
anymore.
But I'm also like embarrassed. And I'm also like, oh, but I'm not a Christian, everybody. I'm still like a cool metal dude. And like, I'm a contrarian. And I have the sigil of Lucifer tattooed on my left hand. And like, yeah.
And then you go from that to deist.
Yeah, to where I'm sort of like, okay, that stuff sucks and is kind of embarrassing. I sort of like am growing up spiritually and being like, oh, it's kind of goofy to do that. Like, why do I even want to troll a Christian? Who cares?
Yeah.
And I come into deism from the Big Bang.
Okay.
Father Lemaitre, I think that's his name. Shout out to him and Einstein for the Big Bang.
Yeah,
which
people
is,
don't know that the Big Bang was coined by a Catholic priest.
Yeah. And so as I began to learn about the Big Bang and the origins of the universe, because someone eventually will pose the question, something can't come from nothing.
That's right.
And then you go, well, where would it come from? Well, it can't come from inside space and time, so it exists outside of space and time.
Yep.
And it has to be intelligent. And if it's intelligent, that means it's all powerful. And if it's all powerful and we live in a world where there's good, then it must be all good. And you know, these logical things happen. But I had that and I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm not Christian, but I literally can't think of another way this universe exists. So I'm going to push myself into deism because it's just logically makes sense.
Yeah,
the evidence is there. There's more evidence for God than not.
Yes.
So
And it's reasonable. It's reasonable and it's rational to think something caused this.
Yeah, it's incredibly reasonable, especially when you stop and you just think about creation in life from the perspective of just a logical, like, how and why, and not the, like, Christopher Hitchens, like, well, if God exists, then apparently your society is going to go to war with a different society. Like, they make these huge leaps that kind of make you think, well, religion's evil, so God must be evil. And, like, you know, then you become more open-minded, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, God is real. And like, but who knows what he wants from us?
Yeah. The funny thing about that is the measure by which an atheist uses to judge God is still inherently a Christian measure.
Yeah.
You're trying to borrow from God to judge God, not understanding that God is outside of your own paradigm. And you're not only are you strawmanning, but you're actually using Christian themed language to judge God, which is hilarious.
It is. The new atheists just get crushed in debate because they all have to defend moral relativism, which we all figured out recently is the argument to defeat them. Yeah. And so as soon as you bring up moral relativism and they're intellectually honest, it's pretty much over for them. Maybe not personally because they're okay with it, but any like random observer who's on the fence about God or not, and then they hear me go, yeah, the Holocaust was bad. And then they go, well, objectively, no. The rational person goes, I'm going to go with the guy who said it was bad.
Yeah.
So they're doing not great.
Yeah, no, that's good. And so deist to theist to Christian theist to Catholic?
Yes.
That was the
So
flow?
I went from deism straight into Christian.
Okay.
Christianity makes truth claims. And they're backed by so much. I'm so interested in history that the historicity of Christianity, did I use that word right? Doesn't matter. Just sucked me right into Christianity. The evidence was just overwhelming the like secular evidence even. And then I began to, here's what happens. I learn about Christianity and the evidence, and I'm kind of like, okay, there's something here. So then I'm like, well, let's look at Christian values and see what's up with that. And at this point in my life, I am working for Gas Digital, comedy like podcast network, and I'm doing a political show where I do punditry, and I'm a far left, but so far left that I'm back to guns and Jesus and also this stuff, like a Jackson Hinkle type.
It almost sounds like Russell Brand being so left, anarchist, and then kind of like whoop,
If yeah, I mean, yeah, it's you'll go all the way over. If you go far enough left, you get your guns back,
Right,
and then
right.
a lot of weird stuff starts to happen. I
yeah.
mean, Stalin was so left that he revived the Orthodox Church
That's right.
and the family,
Yep.
and started giving women medals for having kids, and like and trying to like boost the nuclear family. And the Soviet Union gave us a run for our money. So anyway,
that's what I was raised underneath, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
It drifted back to pretty godless by the time I was a kid. You know?
So
But
unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because I think that like while I don't know that I'm pro socialism necessarily, but like obviously if the family is intact and God is there, how your economics work is kind of secondary to everything else. So anyway, it's a shame they messed that up. But so I did the show, and I would argue in the show, my co-host was a liberal, and so we would argue in favor of sex work and in favor of abortion and in favor of all sorts of left and liberal things. And so as I began to argue these things and go to debates and speak to conservatives and stuff, and I moved to New York for the first time. So my whole life has become this thing where I'm sort of like encountering American leftism for the first time. And what's happening is I'm arguing for these things, and I'm sort of seeing the holes in the arguments, and they're making me feel kind of morally icky. And then I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. And then I start to meet all these New York liberals and these online leftists in this community. And of course, this is American centric. I don't want to make comments about like a Labor Party in Germany. They're probably up to different stuff. But so I'm starting to see this, and then I'm on all these close friends. I'm making friends with all these famous people who are so happy, who are promoting sex work and all these alternative lifestyles. But then you get on their close friends and they're miserable, they're lonely, they're on antidepressants, their relationships are unfulfilling, they're constantly not knowing where they're going to be or what they're going to do or what matters. They're scared, they have no ability to handle like trials and tribulations. Deaths in their family are like forever harming them. Like they have no tools. And then I'm going, okay. And now I'm looking on my Instagram or my Facebook, and I'm looking over at my friends from childhood who are Mormon or LDS and or non-denominational Christians and stuff, and they're posting their families and they're going fishing and they're talking about fellowship and they're talking about love and God. And I'm like, oh, but I thought they were the hateful guys. They don't want gay people to get married. They're evil. And then I'm looking at them and I go, but they're so happy and they're making other people happy. Their communities are thriving. And then I look over at New York and I go, this is the worst place I've ever been. You know what I mean? And everyone's miserable and we're acting like we're not.
Yeah.
And I just started to see the lifestyle thing. And so then I kind of took a step back, like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like polyamory, what am I doing?
Wow.
Like casual relationships, no intimacy, no fulfillment. Like what is going to fulfill me?
Yeah.
And that pushed me towards Christian values. Then I look at the church's values and I go, oh, these are all practical. You know, like even confession, which is a huge problem I had as I was converting. I was like, why would I ever confess? Because obviously I had a Protestant religious education and, you know, a main focus of Protestantism. And now I learn Catholicism also is that Christ came to forgive us and like, he's the guy. But so anyway, confession, I was like, oh, this is bad. And then I think about it practically and I'm like, the act of confession is so beautiful and so affirming and helping. You go to confession, you release your guilt, you tell a man your worst fears and things you've done, and he looks right at you and says, I love you, God loves you, you're going to be okay. He's reminding you that you're forgiven. He sends you out with penance so you feel like you've done something to overcome this. It's like practically like you wish your therapist could give you the closure a priest could in confession.
I got a funny point about that for you in a sec. So I actually am huge on confession. Like I think within Protestant circles, we probably talk about it a lot. Like we need to make it a priority. To do that. So we were talking about you and transitioning from atheist, Satanist, atheist, deist, theist, Christian, Catholic. So tell me about that window. Well, Protestant Christian.
Yeah.
Protestant Christian to Catholic.
Yeah.
Tell me about that window transitioning from deist to atheist and that window of time you were a Protestant, and how long was that and what was that like?
It mostly was just that I didn't understand what Orthodoxy or Catholicism were in relation to Protestantism. Because if you grow up in the United States and you don't have a real religious education about these other, denominations of the faith, then you kind of are, you just think everyone's Protestant. It didn't even occur to me that the Reformation was a big deal until I began to really dig into it. I mean, even as someone who's really into history, you should know the implications of the Reformation and how important it was, but like you kind of don't. You kind of don't learn about it. So
big deal.
Yeah, it's a huge deal.
Big
huge
deal.
deal. Culturally, and there's so much that matters about it. And of course, now it's funny, we live in a world where ecumenical alliances are like more important than ever, and it seems like the Reformation matters less now because we're all like, hey, we got to focus up. But
I think ecumenical conversations are so important. I think sometimes my audience gets frustrated with me because they think I'm like having Catholics on to own them or something, and I'm like, I genuinely admire and appreciate so many aspects. And I don't think, first of all, I feel goofy trying to debate Christians.
Yeah, I'm not interested in that.
It's just not interesting to me. Second of all, I've talked to Trent Horn. I've talked to the best of the best.
Yeah.
And when you let people articulate their position from their worldview and you don't straw man, I think you walk away with going, I disagree.
Yeah.
However, it's not, all Catholics do this, or fill in a blank, right? And so I think the more I've done that, the less I've had this need to try to score points and just go, well, let me just be curious and interested. And especially in your story, I think it's so fascinating to hear that journey, and then you land where you land. And even, so we just had a priest on, Father Simon.
I watched some of that. It was good stuff. He rocks.
He brought us some holy water, actually.
Oh, no, wait. I have holy water in my car.
It's right here. This
Heck
is
dude.
The holy water. And so, so like I grew up Armenian, Apostolic, Orthodox. I'll come back and visit from time to time.
Yeah.
The vibes are fire. Like it's so,
for sure.
It's so cool. So for you were Protestant and you had an issue with confession, which is interesting because as a Protestant, I've never had an issue with confession. I would find it honestly therapeutic if there was an order to it. Like, hey, Tuesdays and Thursdays, the pastor's in a little booth. You can pop in. Like, I think that would be fire. But what was your experience like as a Protestant? How long was that? And what was the tipping point to go? Was it the papacy? Was it like, what was the thing that made you go, okay, I'm Protestant, I'm going to church, I'm active, I'm doing things, or were you not super active?
So I was Protestant in the way that how I had like kind of seen my mom evolve and how I'd seen lots of other, I'm from out west, right? Like the Wild West, Utah, Wyoming, Montana. A lot of Protestant Christians, hey, I don't need to go to church.
Okay. So there's not a big practice emphasis on
this is
faith.
a Bible study, Bible study over church.
Got it.
And so personal relationship with Jesus over all other things, which is why when Protestants want to debate and Catholics get annoyed, I always want to be like, well, Protestantism is like very much in America rooted in personal choice. And so like, Catholicism can be correct to me, but I understand that you're like doing something where the personal choice is the end all be all for you and to choose Jesus. And so like, why would I resent that? But like, so yeah, it was non-denominational in the sense of like none of that. So as I came into Jesus and I was like, okay, God is real. I went to a Catholic church to pray and I had a Marian vision. Okay. And then that was the end of it for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So there was a window where you were kind of going to Protestant church?
Yeah.
Really?
So I have been to like this church called The Rock.
Where?
And it's like in Utah.
Oh, okay. I was we got Rock in San Diego.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like,
and I'm
yeah,
sure that they're like a chain.
Yeah.
I don't know how I would
There's a
describe
lot of
it.
churches called the Rock.
Oh, okay,
They
yeah,
all
and
started around the same time.
It's a good name. It's a great name. And they were like, but they were a rock and roll church.
Ah, okay.
And that turned me off.
That did turn you off.
It did. I didn't
Okay.
like it. I was
Okay.
because I've been going to shows my whole life. Like I've seen Sleeping Giant, and no church is going to outdo that band.
Yeah.
like
Sleeping Giant is the hardcore band that kind of planted seeds of Jesus for you early
in me,
on.
yes,
Yeah.
1,000,000%. They were my favorite band, and I used to do an actual joke where I talked about how one of my favorite bands is so overtly Christian that I have to pretend they're singing about Warhammer instead of God. It's to enjoy it, but like secretly, I'm down with it. They have so many good songs with so many hard lines, but so I kind of just was like, rock and roll worship is sick. Like to go to I saw like this thing where they had like a thing here in Anaheim a while ago where there were like 80,000 Christians just rocking out.
It's Pastor Greg Glory's Harvest Crusader Harvest.
Yeah, I think that
those are friends of
stuff
mine.
rocks.
Yeah.
I think it's so cool as Christians to come together and enjoy music and stuff. But it just for like a Sunday, I was like, I want more. Like what was happening was I was seeing Muslims praying in New York on the street, and I'm like, that's what I want. I want reverence. I want sacredness. I want get down on your knees in the street. And so I just wasn't getting that from rock and roll church.
And how long did you go to rock and roll church?
I'd been in just a couple times.
Okay, just a handful of times.
Just a handful of
Got
times,
it.
and I was kind of like, this isn't for me. And then some time went by, and then I just felt called to go to a Catholic church. And I just walked into one in the middle of the day once, and I didn't realize where they were doing adoration.
What is adoration?
Adoration is when so the Eucharist is the true presence of Christ according to Orthodox and Catholics, and so you take the Eucharist and you put it into like a reliquary or whatever, and it stands, and then so Jesus is in the room with you, but there's no service. He's just there present with you, and people come into that room to pray, to cry, to be close to God, to read the Bible in the presence of God, to read anything, to listen to music. Like basically you just use it as a time to get some real personal worship in. No mass, no someone else telling me a homily, no someone else singing. It's my personal relationship with God in the presence of Him, and it's
do you then take the Eucharist
moving
at this thing or no?
What's that?
Do you then take the Eucharist at this point?
No.
Okay, so it's just there.
You just show up to be in the presence of God and you leave, and it's like really beautiful and contemplative and sacred and like very special.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know though. I just walk in, and Catholics or Christians are down like that. They just let me, this is weird tattooed guy come in, and I sit in the pew, and this is a Spanish parish. And they have like a vibe they go for, and so there's like painted statues, and like it's really beautiful, and there's all these flowers, and I'm looking at Mary, and I'm kind of like, what's the deal with like Catholics and Mary? And I'm in this church view, and then I look over, and I decide like I'm gonna try praying. I'm like, hey God, I'm here. What's going on? And I immediately was overwhelmed with emotion to the point that like, if anyone here has ever had your heart broken where you're so emotional and it's so painful and heavy in your chest and you're like, that is heaving sobs. I was crying like that. And then I saw Mary appeared to me. I had a Marian vision, and she literally just was close to me.
Like your eyes are closed and she's in
My
your vision,
eyes are
or
closed, and I'm trying to pray and talk to God, and I open them, and she's literally standing in front of me.
Open your eyes the way your eyes are
my
open now,
eyes.
and there's Mary
I'm having
standing.
like a psychedelic experience.
Whoa, what'd she look like?
So I can't remember her. I can only remember how she made me feel.
Interesting.
I just remember looking at her and seeing a woman and seeing her features, but not seeing anything but like I was seeing love. Like pure love and light and goodness.
Was she like? Could you tell how old she was? Like, is this like
our age?
It was like our age, like a grown.
So because she has a heavenly in
the glorified state,
which is a glorified state, and so I just remember feeling this overwhelming feeling. And of course I have like a mother wound. I have all these things. And I remember for the first time in my life feeling totally and completely safe and taken care of and like, okay. And it was, it was so life-changing that at that moment I was like, I am dedicating my entire life to being the best Catholic I can be.
And how long ago was that?
That was beginning of 2023.
Okay.
Or like
So,
early 2020, like mid 2023. So it's been, my Christian journey has been 2 years. My Catholic journey has almost been a year now, or more than a year.
So wait, total 2 years? Or are you saying
Total. So like, I would say from deism to where I am now, that's like 3.5, 4 years.
Okay.
For Christianity, from beginning of Christ is the way to now, I would say maybe a little over 2 years.
And what was the point where the tipping of Christ is the way happened?
The tipping for Christ is the way was when I saw Christian values and how they were affecting the real people in my lives and how good their lives were. And when I saw people practicing the opposite of Christian values, not in terms of like evil, because we always think in terms of like, well, if they're not doing Christian values, so they're doing like evil. But I'm talking about not Christian values in like promiscuous and these sorts of things, like little small things that you're like, well, you could be a good person and cohabitate. You could be a good person. And, when I saw that those values were wildly self-destructive and everyone I know who was doing them was doing so much less good than the people who were trying their best to live Christian values, everyone falls short.
Yep.
But to simply try will increase the literal quality of your life. I said, there's no denying it.
Gotcha.
There's
Okay.
actual evidence in front of me I'm seeing.
Yep. Okay. So, I think you make a great point about like rock and roll church. And just for the record, people be mad, I'm not a huge fan of like contemporary Christian worship music.
Yeah.
I prefer gospel music, like black gospel music.
Dude.
I think black gospel music's fire.
Since becoming Catholic, I've gone to a black gospel church and just
Because it's written from a place it's just written from a different place.
Yeah.
And then
there's
the origins of it.
I think too that there's a sort of like letting go.
Yeah.
And giving yourself over to God and the music that's happening in maybe a black Baptist church that isn't so much happening in a rock and roll church.
Yeah.
The one I went to, it did seem very like, we're cool. This is a cool place to be. We have coffee. Hey, we have like we do mountain climbing on Tuesdays and then Bible study. Like we're hip. It really
And
did.
that turned you off.
That turned me off.
Was it turned you off because you're the guy that, you went and lived in Brooklyn. You are in the stand-up comedy world.
Yeah.
You got the tats. Like you're like, stop trying to be cool. I already got that kind of sorted out. Was there some of that to you?
I think being cool is like being brave or being funny.
Yeah.
If you have to say you are, you aren't.
Yes.
So
yes, that's good. That's good. That's good.
So, but those three things you don't decide.
Yeah.
Other people let you know that you have those virtues
Yes.
or whatever. And so I didn't like that they were like, we're cool.
Yeah.
And it was a very overt like, no, Jesus is cool, guys. And I wanted, and I think that's cool. I think it's good of them.
Yeah.
And I understand what they're doing. And if they reach someone who they wouldn't have reached, all of it is worth it. One saved soul is worth all the cringe in the world.
Amen.
But
that's a t-shirt right there.
yeah.
One saves
All's worth all the cringe in the world. But I don't. My whole thing was like, well, if God is my savior, I don't need him to be cool.
Sure.
I don't even need to like him. He saved me.
Yeah.
Logically, I don't. Christianity doesn't have to have anything to do with feeling.
Yeah.
Once I look at the evidence and I see that it's true.
Yes.
And so like, I was just like, oh, I don't need all that because I have faith in my, in the knowledge of, because faith isn't in nothing.
Yeah.
What is Trent Horn's book? He says, like, if you pack your parachute before you jump out, you still got to have faith that you did it right. 99%, you're pretty sure. You have a lot of evidence. You've thought it through. You've done the work. But you still have to make a leap of faith.
Yeah.
And so I kind of thought, well, I have 99% sure I packed this parachute well. So I'm going to take the leap of faith over here because I don't need God to be cool. I just need him to be my savior.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's a great point. And so this is how I think about it. And you tell me what you think about this. And Zach kind of alluded this when we talked to Father Simon is I feel like the continuation of fill in a blank genre of music
Yeah.
and the continuation of, okay, now we're going to do lights and stage or whatever. At one point, the hymns that were written were modern songs. At one point, the chants that were done were modern. At one point, the art that was done was fresh and new at the time, right? So to me, I go, yeah, like, I get that. Like, I totally get that. And I'm actually more with you than I disagree.
Yeah.
Right? Because it definitely comes off try hard, right?
Right.
For some of this stuff. But then at the same time, I go, well, the Catholic Church or the Orthodox Church does a beautiful job of art and all of these symbols and icons and statues and all this dope stuff.
Yeah.
And I go, there clearly is an emphasis of wanting to engage people, perhaps to your
With
point.
an aesthetic.
With an aesthetic.
100%.
It's a different aesthetic. It's a more ancient aesthetic.
Yeah.
I can't trace back to when this started and when that started and when was there a statue versus an icon. Like, some of that stuff can go back to the first century in the early church for sure. In terms of the icons. But at some point that was new and that was fresh and that was engaging, and they put words. I mean, they put pictures up because people couldn't read, and they told stories, right?
Yeah.
And so I think this is kind of the iteration of it. It's just the emphasis is more modern.
You
know?
I see it and I don't dislike it. I just dislike when it's done inauthentically.
Sure.
So like both of us are like Black Baptist Church, banging.
Yep.
And like I don't listen to that music in my car, but I'm there and I'm like, yo, this is it.
Yep.
But sometimes you're there and they're like, here's my original rock song, and like here's it's the I don't want to talk trash because I want people to do well and be happy, but it can feel inauthentic or even corny. To me personally, but I've also like seen videos of Protestant like rock churches, and I'm like, yo, that's sick. Like, they got fireworks.
There's definitely a way to do it.
There's a good guitar.
Yeah,
the
there's
singer's
definitely a way to
killing
do
it.
it.
So there's a way to do it for sure.
I wanted to talk to you. Okay, so you done communion in the Protestant church?
Never.
Never. Okay.
I'd never been baptized or made communion until Easter Vigil with the Catholic Church this year.
Right. So when I talked to Father Simon, obviously a point of disagreement. I think Catholics would affirm that we're saved and we're going to heaven just in the wrong church without I don't know if they say the real communion or whatever the language is, right?
Yeah.
So
the fullness of truth.
The fullness
is
of
what
truth.
the Catholic Church has. Yeah.
Now, I would say if you're not and this is going to sound divisive to Protestants, I would say if you're not a lower level Protestant, like a very you just aren't super hip.
Yeah.
I would say most of Protestants I know believe in the real presence of God in communion. Like, we believe He's there with us.
Yeah, I
right?
think my mom does. And knew that, and which is why she was like, "Don't play around. This isn't a symbol."
Right. But I will say, I am curious. You tell me if I get in trouble for this.
Yeah.
So I was baptized, christened in the Armenian Apostolic Church, Orthodox. You guys believe they have the real communion?
Why not? Yeah, because they have apostolic succession.
Because they have apostolic succession.
Yeah.
Can I go back and just try and check out the difference? You
Yeah.
think that would that get me in trouble though?
I think that if you're in mortal sin, yeah.
I don't think I go to church every week.
Yeah. So I guess if you miss mass, you're in mortal sin.
What does that mean?
So if you're supposed to go to mass to attend an actual mass every Sunday. So to maybe according to and this isn't me, I'm just assuming what an Orthodox priest would tell you. I think they would say your Sunday obligation has not been fulfilled. So you would need to confession.
Okay.
Which I think I'm going to do.
I might do this as an experiment.
Go confess during the week, to anyone who has apostolic succession. It's all valid. To me personally, I don't know if some Orthodox people don't think that Catholic priests have the right to give you sacraments, but doesn't matter. Do that, receive communion with the desire to learn and truly feel the experience in your heart. I don't see anything wrong with that.
I mean, that'd be interesting because I do feel a presence when I do communion.
When I take the Eucharist, it deeply affects me. I literally on days that I'm gonna PR a wait, I go to early mass and take the Eucharist, and I'm like, let's go, and Jesus, let's do it. Dude, it helps.
For real?
It helps, man. Taking the Eucharist helps everything. Okay. I truly feel empowered.
I've never done a PR on the same day I've taken communion. But
yeah, you should, dog. Bro, few things feel better than confession, communion and then the gym.
Yeah.
You're like, dude, I am a knight for God. Like, I'm just lifting, like listening to chants. Like,
that's awesome. So, your journey is super fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. I'm also very intrigued in terms of how are you now navigating being a stand-up comedian with this new encounter you've had with God.
Yeah.
And I know you had your first special, right, on the Dry Bar.
Yeah, that's
Was that your first special?
My first special came out a while ago through Dry Bar. Then I released another one through them. Then I released one on YouTube, and I'm actually about to film another with them.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've had
and they've
4
been acquired
specials.
by Angel Studios now. So the guys who do The Chosen are also going to edit my special, which is hilarious to think about.
Yeah. I think unfortunately Angel
or like they separated now, but like
the
those
same
dudes are
editing,
still there. Yeah, it's very funny.
So tell me about what that transition, because you used to have vulgar comedy and
100%.
profanity and some stuff that wasn't very Christian, and now the Dry Bar stuff is Christian, but you kind of got into it. You did your clean stuff almost as an experiment.
Yeah, so I was asked to be clean so that I could do the special.
But you weren't even a clean comedian.
I was not.
Whoa.
But I was capable, and I was like, oh, well, I can do it. And so I did it, and it went really well. And then I kind of thought at the time, like, oh, it's cool that I can reach like families and all these Christians and people. But I was, and at this time, I'm literally like doing witchcraft, when I first started. And then I'm like, okay, well, yeah, like this is cool. And so I thought I would do both.
Yeah.
And I kind of would give these people the opportunity to enjoy comedy, and then I would do like what I wanted to do, which is sort of just like say gross stuff and whatever. And I think there's value there. I like some pretty gnarly comedy, but now that I've become Christian, it's so funny. It's again the thing where it's less spiritual and more like practical, where I thought to myself, okay, I'm Christian now, and I definitely don't want to do gross comedy. And then I was like, well, how offensive do I want to be? Where do I want to go? And then I thought to myself, how many people message me and go, you're my daughter's favorite comic. We watch you as a family. My grandma loves you. Or I love that I can watch you at work. And I just realized that like end goal, people laugh. How I get them there doesn't matter. If I'm gross, if I'm not gross. So if that's the case, if all I want to do is make people happy and give them a brief moment in time where they are not thinking about how awful life is and they feel good, why would I want to reach less people? Why wouldn't I reach the most people humanly possible? And then I was like, oh, okay, so I'm Christian now, and God is showing me like, hey, like, don't deny anyone happiness. Like, reach the most people. Like, how cool is it that a dad does watch your comedy with his 11-year-old son? And I was like, oh, I should lean into this 100%. And now I'm all in on being as clean as possible all the time. I fall short sometimes. I've swore here and there on stage, but nothing gross now. Never anything sexual or anything like that. But yeah, it was a practical thing where I was like, oh, the Christian values are the values that are going to make the most people happy and bring the most love and joy into the world, which is technically my job. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Has there been a massive backlash to your pivoting?
Yeah.
I remember you mentioned death threats when you came out.
Dude, so I began to discern Christianity and deism, and that was like public when I was doing that political show where lots of like libertarians and liberals would watch it. I was starting to have opinions that were making them frustrated with me, and I always had opinions that frustrated them, like pro-gun, yada yada yada. But I would have like, oh, maybe we should stop and think about pro-life. Like maybe we should compromise.
We should consider the babies.
Right, yeah. And I kind of started thinking like, in having like being more open-minded and sort of finding a middle ground and stuff. People were getting mad as I'm exploring this. So then I thought, oh, well, they'll just be kind of mad because everyone sees this coming. I come out as Catholic, 10,000 followers lost in 24 hours.
Really?
Hundreds of death threats on every platform and ability you can message me. People doxed me. People texted me. People sent me my mom's address. It was crazy.
Wow.
It was the wildest thing that's ever happened. I received for weeks messages a day, tons of messages like you're saying the worst things you can imagine about the Catholic Church, about Christians in general, about me. I'm a traitor. I'm this, I'm that. I can't support you because you support evil organizations. You're homophobic. You know, the laundry list of things people say Christians. It was so overwhelmingly negative. It was an experience that like I don't even know how to describe.
Wow.
I just kind of floated through it. You know, obviously, thank God that I'm coming out as Christian and not like, and I'm not being treated that way over something else because I just leaned into Christ. Yeah. It's as easy as my priest going, yeah, that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And Christ told you, and here's where he said that would happen to you. Which is so, by the way, just is fulfilling to me. It's hard and it's scary and it's difficult and it makes you feel bad at the time. But there's also a part of you that's like, I'm a warrior for God. Let's go. You know, and so.
And this was all after you got baptized on Easter.
No, this was before.
Before.
Just simply doing a podcast where I talk about my intention to convert.
Whoa.
Had people reacting like that.
Wow.
So then I got baptized and I lost like another 7,000 followers in one day.
Holy moly.
Because they were like, I thought you were joking.
They thought it was a troll.
Yeah. So these are people now who are unfollowing me that are not so crazy about Christianity, but if I'm actually a Christian, now that's not okay. Isn't that so interesting? There's two levels of people who are mad about this. People who are mad about the values and the people who are mad about the fact I literally did it.
Wow.
So interesting. But yeah, the amount of hate was unreal. Unreal.
You think it's primarily because you come from more of these like liberal background, leftist background spaces?
I think a lot of it has to do with that. Most of it does. And then two, that I was I'm like an alternative guy, so a lot of alt people like me. And to this day, I still have tons of like LGBTQ fans and things. And like, obviously, I love and care about them and want the best for them. I will spend time with them. But they have to know I want them to come to Jesus. And as long as we are both on the same page with that, hey, I love you as a human being. I don't like your lifestyle. I wish you would come to Jesus. And they go, well, I love you. I don't want to do that. And I'm like, well, I'll get you. And then that's it. You know, and then we love each other. But like, you know, the amount of people who were just like, you're a traitor.
Wow.
You've betrayed. And I want to be like, betrayed what values? Because I've always been pro-family. I've always been pro-gun. I've always been like pro-community service and taking care of each other. And like, what... Honestly, my values aligned with Christianity already. That's what helped me become Christian. But people aren't thinking about that.
Wow, man, that's interesting. I didn't anticipate there'd be that much
dude
backlash.
Straight up.
Yeah.
People like confronting me in real life.
In real life?
Person.
Okay, I thought this was just like
no.
habitually online brain.
I saw people like in New York who were like, yo, you're like a Christian now, right? And I'm like, yeah. And then they're like, yeah, I don't mess with that. Like, to my face.
What would you respond?
Dude, I would just be like, all right, like, not a problem. Like, I don't even think, there were some people who confronted me that I just ignored.
Yeah.
But yeah, people in person.
Wow.
In person. A lot of women, mostly women.
Huh. Is this probably after the Roe v. Wade thing that they've lost?
I guess.
It?
Yeah. I also just think I have a lot of female fans who consider me like a... Oh man, how do I say it? I'm going to say this and I'm just going to feel stupid and look cringe doing it. But I held a position in like my leftist circles of being like, you can be masculine and be on the left. And so there are a lot of women who want masculinity, but they're incredibly liberal and they can't find it.
Because there's not a lot of it on the left.
It's not there. And so
you were like the avatar they were all
I'm
dreaming for.
Yeah.
Become a conservative, lady.
Yeah. So they're like, oh, I can have the guy who has my leftist opinions, but who also secretly is a little toxic, would fist fight for me, is going to take care of me, wants to pay for me, stronger than me, is going to tell me what to do low key, but like be gentle about it. Yeah. And then you're like, yeah, you ain't gonna find that in Bed-Stuy, girl. You're not gonna find that in any of the places you're on. And you're definitely not gonna find it on Twitter either. You know.
So how long did you live in New York?
I lived in New York for 4.5 years, 4 years.
And when was this?
This was like right after my first special. So I moved in 2019.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then where do you live now?
Utah.
You back in Utah?
Yeah.
What brought you back to Utah?
My values.
Okay.
I just decided being in New York and doing the rat race and going out all the time and spending time with people who do drugs and don't have good values and who also show business is not a meritocracy. It's a who you know and who you're around. And I don't want to be around that much because any successful person in show business, you know, who's not doing something like you or I are doing where we're sort of independent, they are a slave to the grind. They have to be out meeting people. They have to be out impressing people. They have to meet the right people. They have to be around. You have to pay dues. You have to say the right things, impress the right people with the right opinions. And like, I don't want to buy into any of that. And then also to do all that, now I'm spending less time with my family, less time with my friends, less time on my hobbies, less time on personal growth. And I thought to myself, there's no way being famous is more important than my family, than my personal growth. And so I said, no, I'm just going to go to Utah. So I moved to where there's basically no comedy and was like, well, I'll just keep doing my thing online and grow myself and bet on myself. And if my career dies, I'll get a job and I'll be a good Christian.
Yeah. Wow. So how long have you been back in Utah?
I've been back in Utah for like a little less than a year now.
Okay. And is there an open mic scene there?
There is. We have a club called the Wise Guys, and it's my home club, and it actually is so cute. It's great.
Yeah.
So it's not as bad as it could be. It's not like I moved to like Pocatello, Idaho, or some crazy thing, you know, but it's not like I'm in Riverside, California, you know, like there's stuff going on where I'm at. Yeah. I lived, but shout out to the 909.
Yeah. We just got our first comedy club in Escondido about 20 minutes from here.
Nice.
Yeah. And then there's a little scene in San Diego, I think, that my buddy Rufat, when he came out, I kind of
San Diego kills it.
Yeah.
They have two really good clubs.
Yeah.
So.
I'm not sure what clubs we went to, but he had a night of like back to back. Like they did like a little small like bar, and then they like went over near Mission Bay, and there was like an actual like fire looking club. Like, it was like a dope club.
Yeah, that club rocks.
It's like downstairs almost. I think you got to go up and then down, and it was fire.
Yeah.
And then So, can I geek out a little bit about just like your writing process?
1,000,000%.
So I'm like, secretly, I've always wanted to try. I don't know if I will.
Let's get you going, bro.
Maybe when I do my book, you tell me what you think about this. And I'll show it to you afterwards. There's like a comedy boot camp workshop in New York that's like 5 days long, and then at the end you do your 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's common.
Yeah,
we do those. Like pretty much every comedy club runs something like that.
Yeah. So I was thinking about doing that once I get closer to putting out my book, so that I could have like a tight 5 minutes.
Yeah.
At the beginning of my talks around my book.
You don't got to do all that. We'll hang out.
Okay,
I'll put you up, dog.
so tell me your writing process, because I've heard this. I've heard two different extremes. One extreme from the Dave Chappelle, I want to say the Louis C.K.'s, they go up there and they just riff. They just go up, they may have a premise, and they just freestyle and like get to flow state, and they're riffing, and then they're recording it, and someone's taking notes, and then they go back and they restructure a set around that. Now, obviously, when you're Dave Chappelle, you can just do that.
Yeah.
But then I've heard the other extreme, which is the Joe Rogan tapping on a keyboard and writing out the joke word for word, and every moment has to, right? Now, it would seem like the way to build a good set is through conversation, riffing, and kind of getting stage time, having a premise, then to sit down like Joe Rogan and typing it out word for word.
Yeah. That's what most comics do. They're somewhere in the happy middle.
Okay.
I'm on the extreme end of no sitting down and writing.
No sitting.
I have never, not once in my life, sat down to write a joke. Ever.
Wow. Okay. You're giving me so much hope right now.
I don't write my jokes out.
Okay.
Any special you've ever seen me do, those jokes were never written out.
Never written down.
Ever.
Uh-huh.
I'll write the set list, and I'll write like ideas. Like I'll write like let's say I did one of my special was about a story about me being banned from karate. I literally remembered that story and thought, oh, this is funny. I should do a bit about it. I tell my brother, he goes, I remember when you did that. That's funny. You should talk about it. And then all I do is I go the premise in my head, and I kind of like basically perform it in my imagination at the gym or whatever. And I'm just thinking about like how I would say it and stuff. Then I just go on stage and do it. And like you said, like you're working through it, and I record it, and I kind of think that's what I liked, that's what I didn't like, and I add to it. And then a friend who's a comic sees you do it, and he goes, hey, I got a tag for you. And you go, oh, hell yeah, bring it on to me, dog. Let's do it. And then now I got the next thing, and it just grows, and then you film it. And that's my process. And that process makes other comics very mad.
Yeah, because
The
I've
fact
always
that I
heard
don't
the
have to do-
opposite. I've heard the opposite, and I'm like, that sounds awful. Like,
Yeah.
I sitting down and writing out jokes word for word.
Dude, I know comics who sit and write every day like it's a Bible study. Like they sit and they go, what's funny? That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Like I would, my jokes are, oh, that's funny in conversation.
Right.
Or I remember this.
Right.
Or my mom mentioned something.
Right.
And then I just take that thought to stage and I just grow it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
how often do you then go to your open mic and try new material?
I used to a lot. Nowadays, I don't go to open mic anymore.
At all?
No, I do workout rooms, which is like 10-minute spots or whatever. Like I'm in LA. I'm like, I tell the guys at the Improv, like, hey, I'm in town. Can I jump on a spot? And they go, we got 2 for you. And I do 2 10-minute spots. That's not an open mic.
Back to back, or
Yeah, like in 2 different rooms or whatever.
Okay.
So like that's like if you're further along in your career, you don't do open mics anymore. You do those kind of, they're called spots.
Got you.
And then, but like honestly, I'm to the point now where I kind of know what my style is, what I want for my comedy, and people know what they want from me, and I'm able to deliver on that. So I don't even do that anymore.
Okay.
I literally just have a premise and I bring it up when I'm headlining and I just do it. And very often it's funny enough.
Yep.
And if I don't think there's legs, I just never do it again.
How much of this is also just like timing, delivery, rhythm, and how long does that take to refine?
It's all as important.
Okay.
It's all equally important.
Okay.
But the most important thing about comedy is that you make people feel.
Okay.
The funniest people in the world aren't famous. The funniest comics working right now aren't doing well because they'll murder, they'll crush. They're so much funnier than I could ever be, whatever. They crush, and then afterwards, people go, that comic was so funny. Man, you killed me. You said something about kangaroo or whatever, and then it's over. Because he made them laugh, he didn't make them feel good. People remember how you made them feel. Think of a night of comedy you watched, and then try to think if you can remember the actual jokes or if you just remember laughing. You usually only just remember laughing and like one thing they said in an hour or whatever. If you make someone feel really good in a way where they feel seen or heard, or like your experience is going to continue on with them, or it's a shared experience between 2 people, how they feel is what matters. So people remember that I made them feel good, not that I made them laugh. And that's why I'm successful.
Wow. So what does that look like from a practical career standpoint now, right?
So this is the part where like the rubber meets the road, and now there's like, just do you have it or do you not? You know, what did Snoop Dogg say when he was like, I love my friends. I've tried to like make every friend I have famous, and it literally doesn't work.
Shout out to you for all the rap references, by the way.
Oh, yeah. I'm a fan. And so, but that clip of Snoop being like, they don't got it. I had my friend opening for me for a year. I put him on TV. I gave him money. I did everything to make him famous. And he's a good guy who's talented, but you either have it or you don't. And there's a part of that in comedy where if you make people, you know, if people think you're like being a performy, jokey guy or whatever, that turns people off. Like you could be the best writer in the world and it ain't nothing gonna happen. You have to have like an innate knowledge of how to make people feel like you're their friend. Because my comedy does well because if you come to a show, it feels like we're at that party and the music's low and everyone's sitting on the couch and you're holding your girlfriend's hand and it's winding down and there's one guy and he's talking and people are laughing and like you're just having a good time and it's that like the vibes are so good. You know, that's what I want people to feel like.
So from a practical standpoint, is the model now you have a couple specials out, you have a public platform, you're popping in, you're working out new material, and is the model now you're not doing a rat race of the 7 open mics a week in New York City or in LA. You're creating new material, and then eventually you're slowly building up to like having your own Netflix special, or like how does this work?
I would love to have a special with a bigger network, and like I love Dry Bar; they're the best, and I'll continue to work with them as long as they'll have me. I'm so thankful. But obviously, every comic wants like the HBO or Netflix or whatever. So yeah, that is like the goal for me personally, is to work towards that. But honestly, truly, I was on a podcast with Matt Fradd, and he was like, "What are your goals?" And I was like, "I don't have any." Like when I started comedy, I was so poor and I was struggling and I was trying to change my life. My goal was not to be a comedian. It was to not check my bank account when I eat. Like, I want to be able to take my girl out and then not be like, okay, so how much do I have for a drink tomorrow before I get to work or whatever? You know, like that poor feeling. And so I did it. So now I'm kind of like, well, where do I go from here? So I kind of don't know.
So are you going to do like a tour?
So I am touring.
You are touring.
I tour every year. Okay. I'm touring lighter than I was. I was on the grind.
Yeah.
Dude, one year I flew like 230 times in a year.
Sheesh.
Crazy.
Wow.
I was doing weekend shows, and then sometimes I would fly like on a Monday, do a show, fly home, do that same thing on Wednesday, and then do a weekend of shows. It's crazy. Unsustainable. Now I've told we got to scale it back. My family's more important. So it's so funny, scaling it back, posting less on social media, trying less hard, and just being more myself has made my career do better.
Interesting.
But you feel like if I don't post, it's all going to fall apart.
Yep.
I don't post for 7 days sometimes on Instagram.
Yeah.
I literally don't post on TikTok anymore.
Yeah.
I'm crushing.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how that works.
Yeah.
Authenticity is so much more important than anything else in terms of people consuming your content as like a funny guy, I guess.
And what style of venues are you touring right now? Is it mainly comedy clubs? Are you doing theaters?
Comedy clubs.
Comedy clubs.
Theaters and markets where like I do well, but like those are like out where I'm from, you know, Idaho and like Montana and places where cowboys are.
Yeah. Man, that's so cool. It's dope to see the transition happening and you doing well.
Yeah.
It seems seamless. I watched a good chunk of the dry bar bits that you have on you. And I was like, man, these are so good, and they're relatable, they're funny, they feel like a conversation. You know, they don't feel super structured. Do you envision the space for, I don't know what you would call it, clean comedy? Do you see this space growing and getting bigger?
I do.
Okay.
I truly think that clean comedy is the way of the future. The same way like YouTube kind of was like, everyone's going to be better now. Like in the terms of service changed everything. Now content is so much different. Online in general, and like some of that's negative. Obviously, we both know that, you know, all these tech companies can kind of get a little over crazy, but they did kind of set the standard, and now people are having to create more family-friendly content. People are having to swear less. People are having to post less gross stuff, and that is happening in comedy, where people are realizing there's money to be made by reaching a much more broad audience. And you can't just go on SNL and be famous now. Like, and so like you're not going to see another Louis. You're not going to see another like Disgusted. Like that's just not going to happen. And so, I think clean comedy is the way of the future.
Yeah, that's fire. I mean, that's encouraging, and I definitely think that, especially as someone who has kids, you know,
dude,
like,
having
kids is like, you want something fun and cool to do with your kids that's not like super vulgar.
Exactly. I think that there's a resistance to clean comedy right now because there's a connotation, but I think over time people are just going to realize like being clean is as reasonable as like not saying slurs, you know, like I simply want more people to enjoy, and if I'm funny, I'm funny.
Yeah.
So
now, who are some of the folks that you've had the pleasure of connecting with, working with? You did something. You opened for Norm Macdonald, right?
Yeah, for a while. Yeah, I opened for him multiple times.
What was that like?
Dude, amazing. Yeah. Such a cool guy. Truly, genuinely one of the nicest people I ever met in my life. Yeah. When I first opened for him, I was like a bouncer at the comedy club, and I would.
You just keep getting more interesting, bro.
Of course,
we're getting to the biker story in a bit, but this is crazy.
Being a bouncer, if you look like me, is like it's like McDonald's. Like, of course, I have to work there if I'm poor. You know, like that's flipping burgers for a guy like me. So I was a door guy. You know.
Yeah.
And I was also trying to get my career going. And so I would open. And so I always had a joke, like, you know, I would host and I'd be like, hey, everyone, you may remember me from checking your ID at the door, like my credits.
Awesome.
But so I'm like a low level guy. I literally work at the club. I'm opening for him. He was so cool to me that he was like, "You're funny." He took me out to steak dinner every night he was in town, chopped it up with me, talked to me like an equal, never talked down to me, never like talked shop in a way where he was trying to be like, "This is what you need to do to be better." Treated me like I was also a famous guy.
That's cool.
It gave me his number afterwards, but actually messaged me back when I messaged him. So kind, good guy. Yeah.
That's so far. You in your interview with Pints with Acquaintance, you said there was other comedians that would give their number and never get back to you.
Yeah.
You would name some of those guys right now for us?
Who would? No. But some of them are famous in here in LA for sure.
Yeah. And they were just like, yeah, let's connect. And just
yeah, you're so funny. Let's connect. And you have like, you hang out and it's cool. And you're like, not even trying to network. You're just in the vibe and you're working, and then they're like, yeah, we should work together, or like, I'd love to have you on my pod, I'll help you out. And then they just ghost you, you know, and you're like, great. But comics who don't ghost, who are awesome and cool, Moshe Kasher, Norm Macdonald was awesome. Nikki Glazer, don't watch her comedy if you're Christian, maybe, but she is a kind and good person.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there are comics who mean what they say and come through with being cool. So
how hard is it to building out that hard ticket draw in terms of the grind of it, like to go from comedy clubs to theaters to bigger theaters?
It seems insurmountable.
Yeah.
Like it is the same way. Like if you're a person who's a public person, the further you get away from your first pop or that thing that gave you the eyes on to have the opportunity to grow as a public person or like an entertainment business person, you kind of forget what it was like, right? Or what happened exactly or how you did it. And that's how I feel about like the next step, like to grind up, to level up and be more famous or whatever. I'm like, I literally don't know how I just keep doing what I'm doing and it works out.
Yeah.
You know? And so it seems insurmountable, especially in comedy. It's not like music where like, go play this festival or collaborate with this artist and you're going to move up because you're more relevant because they're acknowledging you. Like comedy doesn't work that way.
Sure. And it seems like the model in music and in comedy has been like vertical short form content, specifically crowd work for comedians.
Yeah, that's it right now.
But from your standpoint, you don't like doing crowd work, or you don't like posting crowd work because oftentimes crowd work is just roasting the crowd. Yeah. And it sounds like you've had a shift of like, I want to just sit there and make fun of my audience.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to make fun of them, but I did used to do lots of crowd work, but I would do positive crowd work.
Okay.
I thought it was really funny. Like my first roast battle I ever did, I complimented the person to win.
It's like a reverse rap battle.
I literally, I did a thing where I was like, I can't believe you would hurt me when I'm saying all this good stuff about you. And I went and found like really good things about them and had like his mom give me testimony about how good of a person he was. And I won because it was, people were just saying it's so funny that he got you like that. But I think that in crowd work is the same thing. Like when I ask you for what you do for work, I don't want to hurt your feelings. I want to make whatever you do sound as cool as possible. Like you're the hero. That's fun to me. What bothers me about crowd work really is that comedians post crowd work, and I'm going to ruin it for everyone who watches. When you watch it, stop and think to yourself, is the comedian being funny or was the audience member the one who was funny? Very often comedians post crowd work and the audience is funnier than them, and the reason there's a laugh. And so you're like, well, that comedian didn't do any work. They weren't even doing their job. They simply created a situation where someone else had the opportunity to be funny.
Wow.
So if you're posting a clip and the audience is funnier than you, you have made a mistake. But people love those clips so much, and people want to be involved and they want to be a part of the story and what's happening, and they see themselves in that person. That content crushes. And also there's a magic trick to it. People think that crowd work is a magic trick. Like you're so quick-witted and fast. It's not. Almost everything is a pre-canned answer. Like a lot of crowd work are written jokes that you're tricking someone into getting you started on. Like, and that's why there's so many canned questions you ask. What do you do for a living? Well, I have a thing if you say you're a lawyer. And what do you do for a living? Well, I got a thing if you got a girl with you. What do you do for a living? Well, I got a thing for this and that, you know? And if you do enough crowd work, it's like, you just build that repertoire, and now you have the thing every time. So it's a magic trick.
It's almost like a rapper freestyling, but it's really half written.
Dude, totally. Totally. Here's the thing, too, is that among comics, among each other, we all understand that when someone starts doing crowd work, they don't have material. They're doing the safe thing. An audience sees crowd work as dangerous. A comedian sees crowd work as safe. Because the laughs per minute can be low. The vibe in the room can be low. You are not the only person that needs to make everyone laugh. You have help. The crowd is helping you. If you have to stand up there and just do your material, it's all up to you, baby. Be funny or not.
That's good.
That's dangerous, especially in a bad room.
Yep.
You do comedy in a room that's kind of not hot, kind of cold, kind of scary. Well, you do the crowd work. I get one little pop. I won. We did that together. I go in there to the cold room and I have to do my material. That's scary. You're committing to you taking control of the room completely alone and not succeeding based on how the temperature of the room is. So the crowd work is the safe thing. Anytime you see a comic doing crowd work, they're being safe. Especially if they headline. You're doing crowd work. Did you not write an hour of jokes? Because they paid to see your hour. And you're doing crowd work? Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Biggest difference between the LA comedy scene and the New York comedy scene?
I mean, it's just the difference between New York and LA in general. I saw Tom Cruise in New York and LA separately. I saw him in LA. People were going nuts. His security was trying to like get everyone away. People, Tom. I saw Tom Cruise in New York. He was creating a big hullabaloo or whatever. Like people are all in the way. New Yorkers were like, get away from here. Tom, we don't want you in this coffee shop. I need to go to work. Like that's the difference between the two places, right? And that's kind of how it manifests itself in comedy. In LA, it's very like performy and sort of clicky and sort of like, what weird thing are you up to? And very cerebral and like alty. And then in New York, it's very like, I do 9 spots a night. I haven't eaten in weeks. I'm tired. What are you doing right now? You know, like it is the difference between the two cultures, for sure.
Yeah.
You know,
have you done anything in Austin with Rogan's new thing?
I've not been to Mothership, but I've been to Austin. The scene in Austin is pretty cool.
That's what I heard.
It reminds me of Salt Lake scene, but it's popping. That's the place right now. Joe Rogan created a third spot where you can go be a successful working comedian in a city and network and do things. I thought about going to Austin, but again, family first. So
So when you say family, what family is in Utah?
So I've got like my brother, my mother, and my cousins, and then of course like a lot of my incredibly close friends from my past who have moved on.
Okay,
and we're a small family together for sure.
Got it. What's it been like in terms of relationships becoming a Christian?
Like dating relationships? It's been interesting. I have a very specific look and I attract a very specific type of woman and she is not godly. And you know, no shade to her. I appreciate that you like me. So obviously that got shut down. There were a lot of women who were hating me. Then there were a lot of women who were like very kind, but they're like, you're not really into that. And I'm like, no, I am. And so
you're not like going to mass or it's, you know, I know you're into some of these different like Catholic conferences and all that kind of stuff. You're not meeting like good Catholic girls?
Catholic girls are not interested in me.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think that the Catholics my age are not well catechized. Our age group, there are not a lot of Catholics in our age group. 30 below, those Catholics are hardcore. They've been catechized well. They had a good education. I think the church made missteps in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s where if you were catechized back then, you kind of just were culturally Catholic. You didn't really know what your faith was about.
That's a lot of the pushback that I get from folks that were Catholic that became Protestant is like, it was very cultural. Like, you know? And so, but now it's not, it's like, now it's like a whole new breed of Catholics.
A whole new breed. These kids are not messing around, dude.
I spoke at Lila Rose's event here in March, and it was like a primarily Catholic audience. They would like bust different young adults in, and I hung out. You know, I hang out after everything. I never do just like the green room thing and dip. I'm hanging around, talking. I'm shaking every hand, and these folks are like they're about it, bro.
Dude.
They're about it. They love Jesus and they know their stuff. And I'm like, you're not gonna get me, dog.
Yeah.
Like you're not gonna get me here. Like I'm good. I love you guys, but we're not gonna talk about the papacy or whatever thing you want to talk about. You know?
Yeah.
But they're on it, bro.
They're on it.
Yeah.
I went to this church outside of Austin. Dang, I can't remember. I'm Father Mike. I'm so sorry. But he invited me to adoration. Dude, I'm talking about standing room only, pews so full, people are sitting on each other. Hundreds of college-aged kids like standing around, singing worship music, openly crying, holding each other, talking about the Lord. Like a revival of Christianity in a way that like in all young people, everywhere I go, like young Catholics hitting me up, talking to me, so devout, and young Protestants too.
So let me ask you this. Sorry, I mean to cut you
No,
off.
please.
Would you be more likely to date a younger Catholic or more likely to date a Protestant that's closer to your age?
That's
what a
tough
conundrum,
one.
huh?
That's a huge conundrum.
Because I know, I mean, listen, there's a lot of Protestants in our circles.
Yeah.
A lot of Protestant women that are like, I've been saving myself. I'm 31 and like, I just can't, you know. Yeah.
It would be interesting. I don't know. I think that as of right now in my head, I'm like, I don't think I would want to date someone who wasn't Catholic or Orthodox. But at the same time, like, I'm old. Well,
You're not
like,
that old,
what am I
bro.
doing here? You know, I'm pushing 40. Like, yeah, that's a tough question.
Yeah.
That's a real tough question.
All right.
But yeah, I think Catholic. I would probably want to be with a Catholic or Orthodox person. But I feel like if you're in your 30s and you're Christian and you're trying to get a husband, you might be willing to switch up denominations. As long as we got the Lord in this building, we're good to go.
That's good. All right, guys, we're going to go to the Patreon exclusive section of this conversation. We're going to get into some pretty crazy biker gang stories, okay, that are not appropriate for YouTube. It may not be within community guidelines, all right? And I'm going to see if I get some exclusive confirmation of what bigger bike gang may have been affiliated. I'm going to ask him some questions about a bit he did and how much of it is like actually his life and how much of it is embellished and kind of try to see a little bit behind the curtain. So meet us over on Patreon. We're going to jump into that conversation right now. All right, we'll see you over there. Peace. You ended up catching a case at one point, right? That's since been expunged. From the record.
Yeah. So I basically, that parallels hardcore culture where I'm going to shows and I'm trying to be in bands and I'm fist fighting and I'm going nuts. You know, those two things feed each other. The government is like, we're going to hold you accountable. We're going to watch you. Someone is going to be assigned to you.
Yeah.
Well,
How bad did you beat him up?
Pretty bad. I knocked him out fully cold.
How intense was this? Was it like full on the type of stuff that you hear about the Hells Angels doing?
Yeah. You know, you're hanging out with the boys. You hate these people because they're the enemy and that's fun. But then also like...
Ruslan